What's up, guys and ghouls, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Brandon Smith. It is spooky season, and I just got to thinking, what's a true crime channel without a little Halloween mystery? So I've been lured out of retirement to tell you an eerie story, a story that takes place exactly 20 years ago tonight. So let's see if I still know how to do this and get right into it. The day is Thursday, October 31st, 2002. The song Dilemma by St. Louis legend and my personal high school role model, Nelly, featuring Destiny's Child alum Kelly Rowland, is #1 on the Billboard charts. The film Jackass the Movie, starring Johnny Knoxville and Steve-O, is #1 at the box office. And just last night, 1/3 of revolutionary hip-hop trio Run DMC is killed when Jam Master Jay is fatally gunned down in his recording studio in Queens, New York. 1,200 miles northwest in Minneapolis, Minnesota, 21-year-old Chris Jenkins is being escorted out of a bar. Bristling against the harsh North Star State autumn, Chris heads into the night. What happens to Jenkins after this is a Halloween enigma. This Day in Mystery. Thursday, October 31st, 2002, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, is unseasonably cold. With a daytime high of 33 degrees Fahrenheit, winter is on the horizon in the Gopher State, and snow is expected in just a matter of days. 21-year-old Chris Jenkins is not afraid of a little inclement weather. Born and raised in Eden Prairie, a suburb of Minneapolis, Chris is Minnesota nice through and through. The son of Jan and Steve Jenkins, the blonde boy with the easy smile warms the hearts of all he comes in contact with. However, Jenkins matches tenderness with equal parts toughness. The starting goalie on the University of Minnesota lacrosse team, Chris is in his final year at the academic institution where he majors in marketing and entrepreneurial management. Anyone who has played lacrosse understands the Herculean physical toll the sport places on your body, even more so at the goalie position. But Jenkins, the 6-foot strapping college senior, is undaunted by the task. Halloween night is a big production for many people across the globe. As such, on October 31st, 2002, Chris Jenkins has full intentions of making use of the holiday to celebrate. At 6 p.m., a keg party is in full swing at Chris's off-campus residence. Beer is passed around in red Solo cups by costumed revelers, and spirits are ghastly high. At 10:30 p.m., Jenkins and his girlfriend Ashley Rice pile into the backseat of a partygoer's vehicle. The couple and 2 other Golden Gophers head out in the direction of 528 Hennepin Avenue, the home of Lone Tree Bar and Grill in frigid downtown Minneapolis. At 10:45 p.m., the designated driver steers his car into a nearby parking garage, and moments later, the foursome arrive on the doorstep of Lone Tree Bar and Grill. Dressed in what can only be described as a costume that will not age well, Chris Jenkins is clad in a brown nylon shirt, matching pants, borrowed oversized slip-on moccasins, and headband replete with a red feather. The outfit does not have any pockets, so Chris asks his girlfriend Ashley to keep safe his keys, wallet, and cell phone in her purse. Jenkins is a crowd favorite within the drinking establishment, and in a short amount of time, the already well-lubricated 20-something is soon drunk. Very drunk. His unfortunate costume has also become soiled with a stain that looks precariously like a urinary mishap. The mark and Chris's behavior soon draws the attention of club security. At 11:59 p.m., they ask Jenkins to leave the bar. Stewarded outside in weather that has now dropped well below the freezing threshold, Jenkins overhears the head bouncer instruct his staff not to let the influenced man back into the bar under any circumstances. With re-entry prevented, communication outlets alleviated, and vehicular transportation impossible, Chris Jenkins walks alone down Hennepin Avenue as October becomes November. On November 1st, a very hungover Ashley Rice arrives at her boyfriend's Ontario Street residence to return his previously entrusted property. However, Chris Jenkins is not home. Party guests from the night before, still in attendance, report that they haven't seen Chris since the previous evening. As the hours tick by and no appearance from her beau, Ashley becomes more and more concerned. As the sun sets on Minnesota the day after Halloween, the apprehensive young lady contacts Jan and Steve Jenkins and informs them of their son's growing absence. Within hours, the parents are on their way to Minneapolis from Eden Prairie. The following day, Ashley Rice accompanies Jan and Steve Jenkins to Minneapolis Police Headquarters. However, when the trio petitions to have Chris declared missing, detectives decline to file a report on the condition that Jenkins is over 18 years of age and has yet to be absent without explanation for a combined 72 hours. Unwilling to wait this undue amount of time, whilst their loved one may be in need, Steve and Jan Jenkins move to hire a private investigator, a man named Chuck Loesch. When Loesch pays a visit to Lone Tree Bar and Grill, he is told the same story as the one previously outlined to him by Ashley Rice, with one key distinction. Bar security says that Chris was not asked to leave and insists that Jenkins left the bar of his own accord. One of the bouncers reports that their last sighting of the young man was him turning left on 5th Street just moments after leaving the Lone Tree Bar. Searches of the surrounding area by Jan, Steve, and a collection of worried classmates find no trace of the missing Chris Jenkins. Jan and Steve next hire a canine scent dog team. The squad are brought to the scene and they track Chris's scent from the Lone Tree Bar and Grill to Times Square Pizza and Subs directly across the street, and finally to parking spaces 89 and 90 in an underground parking garage. Droplets of blood residue, a piece of red string, and red feather fragments are also found along the path. Aware of the pronounced unreliability that often accompanies scent dogs' proclamations, the Jenkinses enlist the services of a different canine unit. In an additional search, these separate canines follow the exact same trajectory. Again ending their trail at parking spaces 89 and 90. It is discovered that on the night of October 31st, parking spot 90 played host to one of Lone Tree Bar and Grill's security team's vehicles. This bouncer is contacted by the PI, and a bloodhound from the second search effort hits on the man's vehicle during the interview. But the security guard still insists that he did not see Chris after he left the bar. Now fairly certain that foul play is involved in Jenkins's disappearance, Chuck makes his way back to ground zero of the investigation, the corner of Hennepin Avenue and 6th Street. Loesch speaks with multiple witnesses who were present at the location on the evening of October 31st. No one reports seeing Chris outside the bar. However, many recall seeing a group of approximately 10 people attacking an unidentified person in front of Times Square Pizza and Subs in the early morning hours of November 1st. However, when the witnesses are shown a picture of Jenkins and asked if he could have been the individual who was accosted, no one can say for certain. Chuck Loesch next contacts the Federal Reserve Bank. The location is just blocks from Lone Tree Bar and Grill, but more importantly, the site is affixed with 2 exterior surveillance cameras, each with a unique perspective of the Hennepin Avenue Bridge. Crossing this specific bridge would have been Chris's most direct route home. CCTV footage from the bank reveals absolutely no sign of the wayward 20-something. Flyers and missing persons posters soon dot the downtown Minneapolis corridor. The papering expands eastward with the entire campus of the University of Minnesota blanketed in appeals for Jenkins to be found. But as the snow falls on the Midwest state, an appearance of the missing senior is not forthcoming. On February 27, 2003, a body is found on the banks of the Mississippi River beneath the 3rd Avenue Bridge. Still clad in the Halloween costume that he wore 118 nights ago, with arms crossed over his chest and serenely looking skyward, Chris Jenkins is found deceased. An autopsy is convened. Chris's body has no bruises and no broken bones, an oddity to be certain considering Jenkins was an active lacrosse goalie. Another peculiarity is the condition of Chris's lungs. His pulmonary organ weighs less than half that of the average male, Jenkins's height, weight, and age. Additionally out of place is the state of Chris's Halloween costume. The apparel is relatively unscathed. Jenkins's shirt is still tucked into his pants, just as it was on the night that Chris disappeared. Jenkins's moccasins remain on and secured to his feet. The post-mortem finds a lock of blonde hair clutched in Chris's left hand. Subsequent DNA testing reveals the source of this hair to be Jenkins's own skull. His blood alcohol content is 0.12%, 1.5x the legal threshold for impairment in the state of Minnesota, but modest considering Chris's excessive consumption on Halloween night. Traces of gamma hydroxybutyric acid, or GHB, is also found in Jenkins's system. However, since the compound is both a naturally occurring neurotransmitter within the body of living individuals and a recreational depressant drug, The medical evaluation cannot determine whether or not the substance has been artificially introduced into Chris or not. Jenkins's death is ruled an accidental drowning. Forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden takes umbrage with the determination almost immediately. According to Baden, drowning victims who accidentally fall into water are most often found face down with their arms out towards their sides. A polar opposite description of the state in which Chris Jenkins was found. Hydrologists who study the Mississippi River are also skeptical of the accidental drowning theory. They are incredulous to the idea that Chris could have remained in the water for almost 4 months without being seen, considering the river did not freeze over until January 2003. They point to the fact that the location where Jenkins's was ultimately found had been previously searched, and no trace of the young man was found at that time. Additionally, for Jenkins to have arrived in this location naturally via current, the deposit site would have had to be miles from the bridge he was forecasted to have fallen from. Steve and Jan Jenkins feel that their son was a victim of foul play, but with the classification of death already posited, Minneapolis police are unwilling to pursue any further investigation. Family and friends of Chris Jenkins, therefore, bury their loved one under a cloud of uncertainty. After Chris Jenkins left the bar on the evening of October 31st, 2002, another man was conspicuous in his absence, an individual named Mike Casey. Mike was a police officer who was working off-duty security detail on Halloween night at the Hennepin Center for the Arts, directly across the street from Lone Tree Bar and Grill. Casey and Jenkins had never made acquaintance prior, but on the night in question, the two strangers would be introduced by none other than Ashley Rice. Ashley was a bartender at a different club in downtown Minneapolis. Mike also worked at this specific bar, and the two had a very friendly relationship, both at work and outside the confines of their employment. So much so that when Rice decided to dress up as a sexy cop for Halloween that year, she made use of one of Casey's uniforms to furnish the look. Although not confirmed and staunchly denied by Lone Tree staff security, many believe that Officer Mike Casey was the motivating force behind Chris Jenkins's expulsion from the bar on the night that he disappeared. Reportedly, soon after Chris left, Mike and Ashley became very cozy in each other's graces, spending the early morning hours of November 1st flirting amongst the costume crush of partiers. When asked if their employee, Officer Casey, had been questioned regarding Jenkins's disappearance and subsequent death, Minneapolis police officials responded negatively. When pressed for an explanation regarding the dearth of inquest, queriers were simply told that Casey is a married man with a family, and any speculative investigation into the matter would be improper. Officer Mike Casey has never been formally considered a suspect in the death of Chris Jenkins and remains an active member of the Minneapolis police force to this day. On November 21st, 2006, the death of Chris Jenkins re-enters the media spotlight in the form of a press conference. While sitting right beside Jan and Steve Jenkins, Minneapolis Police Chief Tim Dolan apologizes to the grieving parents. Dolan acknowledges his agency's shortcomings by saying, "We made an assumption, and because of that assumption, I know we caused pain and the Jenkins' family more pain they had to suffer." The police chief also announces that Chris Jenkins' cause of death has been officially changed from accidental drowning to homicide. So what caused this determination about face? Sergeant Pete Jackson, also present at the media scrum, explained that law enforcement was now speaking to a man whom he described as an eyewitness/suspect, and that this unnamed person has given very specific details regarding the exact spot where Christopher Jenkins was thrown off of a bridge. Jackson elaborated that this tipster was currently incarcerated for a separate crime and that his role in Jenkins' death is not yet clear. The clue is tantalizing, and people in the community were feverish to identify the enigmatic informer. In 2005, a man named Jeremy Alford was charged with killing his roommate, Douglas Miller, in absolutely brutal fashion. With the aid of his brother, Jeremy used a metal bar, hammer, barbecue fork, knife, and soda case to end Douglas's life. Alford bludgeoned, stabbed, and burned Miller before finally dumping him in the Iowa River. In 2007, he was sentenced to life in prison for the horrific crime. Reportedly, Jeremy was a regular at the Lone Tree Bar and Grill and may have even been present at the downtown nightclub on the night that Chris disappeared. In 2008, Alford told Federal Bureau of Investigation detectives that he was part of a 300-member gang called the Dealers of Death, and that the group had murdered over 40 different men. Another member of the putative syndicate, an individual nicknamed Zamiley, said that in 2002, Jeremy claimed that he had murdered a college student in an Indian costume, saying, "I just killed this stupid-looking dude and threw him over the bridge." An undisclosed female informant substantiated Zamiley's claim, telling the FBI that on numerous occasions, Alford had bragged to her about murdering Chris and throwing him over a bridge. When asked if he thought that Jeremy Alford killed Chris Jenkins, Detective Gary Sykes, lead investigator in the Douglas Miller homicide case, said it's possible. Sykes proclaimed that the gang, especially Jeremy, is capable of almost anything. They have no compassion for human life, he said. In 2018, Investigation Discovery's Breaking Homicide contacted the imprisoned Alford and asked him if he knew anything about Chris Jenkins' death. The man cryptically replied, "I don't want to talk about anything I haven't been convicted of." The Hennepin County Attorney's Office has yet to bring charges against any suspect in the death of Chris Jenkins, citing the lack of verifiable evidence in the crime. In 2008, retired New York City detectives Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte put forth a theory that 45 different college-aged men who were found dead in bodies of water across 11 Midwestern American states from 1997 to 2007 did not accidentally drown, as concluded by law enforcement agencies, and were instead victims of a serial killer or killers. This murderer or murderers were dubbed the Smiley Face Killers due to the appearance of graffiti depicting a smiley face being found in at least a dozen cases near locations where the duo believed the bodies were dumped in the water. And while the discovery of Chris Jenkins did not coincide with the revelation of any facial graffiti, Gannon and Duarte are still convinced that he was a victim of the namesake slayer or slayers. According to the sleuths, smiley face victims often fit a specific profile: popular, athletic, and successful students. Chris would certainly qualify as each. However, the most common attribute associated with the victims in the detective's proposal is alcohol consumption and impairment. And again, Jenkins was definitely drunk on the night that he went missing. But renowned criminal profiler Pat Brown calls the smiley face theory ludicrous, arguing that the hypothesis does not correspond with what is currently known about serial killers. Brown also believes that the smiley face images found in some, but not all, of the cases are nothing more than coincidences based upon guesses. The FBI, for their part, is equally dismissive, saying that to date, we have not yet developed any evidence to support links between these tragic deaths or any evidence substantiating the theory that these deaths are the work of a serial killer or killers. If the individual or group does in fact exist, no documentable proof currently exists that they are responsible for the passing of Chris Jenkins. All right, so what do I think happened? The story of Chris Jenkins is absolutely tragic and stunning in its dearth of answers. The uncertainty must wreak havoc on his already forlorn friends and family. My prayers are truly with them, and I hope that they find some amount of solace in their time of grief. Now, let's talk theories, and let's start with Mike Casey, the police officer with the controversial agenda. Chris was introduced to Mike by girlfriend Ashley on Halloween night. This much we are sure of. We are less sure of the nature of which Casey and Rice interacted on the morning of November 1st. The general consensus seems to be that the two were very flirtatious in Jenkins's absence. Let's assume for a moment this characterization is accurate. Let's go even further and assume that the two were having some sort of illicit relationship. This involvement still does not necessarily mean that Mike had anything to do with Chris's ultimate demise. Plenty of untoward relationships materialize without the cuckolded party ending him up deceased. Even if you buy into the idea that Casey was wholly responsible in having Jenkins 86th from the Lone Tree Bar and Grill that night, he didn't have to kill the university senior to accomplish what he was trying to achieve: alone time with the man's girlfriend. More to the point, if Mike did engineer Chris's death, he really gained very little from the duplicitous scheme, as according to all parties, Casey and Rice had very little subsequent contact beyond November 1st, 2002. So for me, I think he may have had something to do with Jenkins being kicked out of the bar, but probably not. However, I'm almost certain that Mike did not have anything to do with Chris ending up deceased. Next, let's talk Jeremy Alford. Jeremy is a prosecuted murderer. This is not debatable. The callousness with which Alfred inflicted death upon his victim is also beyond argument. However, I don't think he had anything to do with the death of Chris Jenkins. Often in these cases, it is very convenient to retrofit a narrative into the events of the mystery. Here's what I mean. Jeremy was known to frequent the Lone Tree Bar and Grill in 2002, and Chris disappeared from that same bar in the same year. Jenkins was found dead under suspicious circumstances, and Alfred viciously killed a man, so certainly Jeremy Alfred must have murdered Chris Jenkins, but this singular deduction of reasoning is wholly unsupported. Subjective validation bias is the perceived connection between coincidences, and I feel like the term could also serve as the subtitle of my channel because I seem to talk about the fallacy a lot here. The reality is, Jeremy Alfred encountered plenty of people in his life that he did not kill. I think Chris Jenkins is one of these people. Now let's talk about Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte's favorite pet project, the smiley face killer or killers. Now for this portion of the video, unfortunately, we have to talk about Jeremy Alfred for just a smidge longer. When researching this case, I found the chronology of events particularly interesting. Gannon and Duarte put forth their theory for the alleged 40-plus smiley face murders in June of 2008. In October 2008, then and only then does a hopeless, already life-sentenced Alfred begin talking about the dealers of death and their 40-plus murders. Interesting timing, don't you think? Sounds like a little creative licensing, if you ask me. Do I believe that Jeremy and his gang killed 40 people? I do not. Do I believe that a smiley face killer or killers killed 40 people? I do not. Statistics show that serial killers are solitary predators. While sometimes they do work in pairs and less commonly trios, the act of ritualistically killing multiple people is much, much, much more often an individual practice. So for me to believe that a group killed over 40 different people in multiple states over a decade of time, I would then have to believe that this collective bucked a well-established trend with unbelievable audacity. I subscribe wholeheartedly to statistics, and while I recognize that outliers definitely do exist, I think that humanity most often comports to expectations. So I'm ruling out the smiley face killer or killers theory. So what do I think happened then? Well, while I would love to give you some sort of supernatural Halloween tale, as I so often say on this channel, I believe the truth is a little more mundane. A lot has been made of the fact that Federal Reserve Bank CCTV showed no sign of Chris after he left the bar. But remember, the last person to definitively see Jenkins alive, one of the bouncers from the Lone Tree Bar and Grill, witnessed him turn left on 5th Street. I believe that Chris Jenkins, after a night of drinking, is headed home. However, on this specific evening, be it the alcohol, wind direction, or foot traffic, whatever the reason, he decides to take a different route. Chris staggers left on 5th Street and veers right on North 2nd Avenue. After 6 blocks of walking, Jenkins comes to an impasse. A clumsy detour later through a parking lot and urban shrubbery, and he finds himself on the south shoulder of the Western River Parkway. It is here that an overwhelming urge to vomit overtakes Chris. Steps from the Mississippi River, Jenkins keels towards his chest and barrels down a cement staircase. Now kneeling aside the mighty waterway, Chris is exhaling the night's intoxicants. However, the cold weather has compromised the rigidity of the shore below, and the forward perpetual motion from a particularly nasty throw-up spell sends the well-liked golden gopher into the water. Undermined by inebriation and betrayed by his ill-fitting costume, the athletic Lacrosse standout soon succumbs to the vigilant current. Secreted in shrubbery and shrouded by the impending winter, Chris Jenkins will only be discovered when he is stewarded to his final resting place by the tides of spring. When Chris Jenkins went missing on Halloween night, his family, friends, classmates, and residents of the Twin Cities alike were left wondering what became of the well-liked young man from Eden Prairie. When he was ultimately found, nearly 4 months later, almost all of the same questions remained. How did he end up in the water? Was he killed? Would justice ever prevail? 20 years on, and the questions remain unanswered. Ann Jenkins, Chris's mother, insists that she, like everyone else, remain focused on the person that her son was in the 21 years that he was alive, and not how he died. He was all about friends, and Chris could do anything to make people laugh, she said. No reward is currently being offered in this case. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Chris Jenkins. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Hey, just before I go, I want to take a moment to tell you to enjoy this Halloween season, but remember, above all else, to be safe. Good times are meant to be had in this spookiest of all nights, and they can be even amidst an abundance of caution. Cultivate a thorough itinerary of how you plan on spending your evening. Plan for the unexpected and remain in the company of those you trust at all times, on Halloween and every other night out. I've been Brandon Smith, and I'll see you next time, trick-or-treaters.